Hey, thank you, Brother Ed, for the class there, and yeah, interesting things going on all around the world. You see God's hands in it all, and yeah, so that takes us to our Daniel study here. Today, we're going back. We're in chapter 10 of the Expositor, verse by verse exposition, and so we've gotten almost to the end of verse 5. I think we kind of read everything there in verse 5, but maybe we need a little bit more discussion. But what we've seen so far is the first three verses, Daniel. We find out the time period he's in and what he's doing. He's trying to understand the visions that he's seen, and he's struggling a little bit there. In 3 full weeks, he was subjecting himself to eating no pleasant bread, nor came flesh or wine to his mouth, and neither did I anoint myself till the 3 weeks were fulfilled. And then at the end of the 3 weeks here, excuse me, he sees this vision of this certain man, and in these verses 4 to 6, he's describing what this certain man looks like, and then from there we dive into what the different aspects that Daniel sees as to how that applies to God's plan, to how we interpret things, the different symbols. And it's amazing here. We've got just 3 verses, but we could spend weeks and weeks studying just the aspect of this certain man. And so then last week we got into the certain man and the clothed in linen. Had good discussion on the linen and its meaning. I think the end of that, it says, thus to be clothed in linen is a description of the office and nature of the glorified body of Christ standing in immortal triumph. And then we started into whose loins were girded with the fine gold of Uphaz. And that's kind of where we left off. And so I think there was a question there last week when it says loins were girded with the fine gold of Uphaz, girded. What does it mean to gird? And there's quite a bit written on gird in certain books. I think if you go to Be Transformed by Brother Grocott and other places, there's quite a lot of exhortation material in there for all of us. But if we just go to the word gird, it means to be gathered, or gather the robe around the waist, or it's to bind as to put on a belt. And it's to just go quickly to Be Transformed, volume 2. Let's see if I can get there. Shoot. I want to be on page 348. And if I can get there, I'll just read a couple things to you, just to be able to give you an idea of what we're looking at when we read gird. Of course, my computer is not going where I want it to go, but that's the way things normally go. Here we are. So there's a lot of verses in the Bible that talks about gird, but just want to just read a couple. It says on page 348, it says, wherefore gird up the loins of your mind. What a fitting and expressive form of words. The girding up of the loins was the gathering together of all those loose folds and ends of the flowing eastern garments, drawing them all up together compactly between the legs and into the waistband, so as to leave the legs free and untrammeled for traveling or strenuous work. Workmen, pilgrims, runners, wrestlers, soldiers, all girded their loins, and all are used as type of Christ's brethren. Israelites were to eat their Passover with loins girded, Exodus 12, verse 11. Vigilant and intent upon their salvation, partaking with the alertness, ready to go instantly at the given signal. And Jesus said in Luke 12, verse 35 to 36, let your loins be girded about, and your lights burning, and you yourselves like unto men that wait for their Lord. And then it carries on from there. There's quite a few different passages that we could look at, and examples of gird. And then there's also when we look at that, the last part of the verse was the loins were girded with the fine gold of Uphaz, and there's quite a bit in Eureka about the gold of Uphaz or Ophir. And so I just want to just quickly summarize the end of that verse 5 that brings out the gold and the picture. It points to that we are looking at this certain man that is girded with a tried and precious faith of the finest gold. The man, or the multitudinous man, is girded or strengthened with the most precious and complete and tested and tried and true faith. And so that's one of the aspects here that we're looking at with this certain man. Do we have any comments there? I see Brother Ed, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I just, I don't know if you can see my screen or not, but I've just got an illustration of the process of girding up the loins. And this is taken from a note that I had on First Peter, where he talks about girding up your loins. And it just shows the process of how they did that in those times. From a long robe, girding it up to where they could be all set for battle or hard labor, whatever they had to do.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brother Ed. Shows it quite well. Brother Glendon.
Just to kind of put it in terms that we can relate to a bit, if you want to try that out, put on something very long and flowing. Women, I suppose, would relate to this probably better in our modern society than men would. But even men, if you wore a bathrobe, particularly a bathrobe that's much too big for you, and you might tie up the belt in the middle of it. But still, it's going to be pretty hard to go out and gather up firewood or run a chainsaw or do your chores with that loose bathrobe around you. And I mean, I love it when we see a scriptural type like that, and then you can go and try it out, find some way to try it out so that you relate to it in a physical manner. You relate to the natural, and then the lessons usually become quite obvious from that. And anyway, the other example of that perhaps is if you've seen the film Lawrence of Arabia, which is probably quite a useful film to have a look at, to be somewhat familiar with. Not that it captures a huge event on the world stage, but certainly related to some quite big ones. And you see those loose flowing garments. Some of the Palestinians still wear them today, or Middle Eastern tribes still wear them today. And you're not ready to do much when you're in a long oversized bathrobe, other than just relax. And we do something similar even with our sort of modern Western clothing, which our modern Western clothing is very fitted, and that's largely the result of industrialized weaving and sewing technology. We can weave bolts of fabric easily, and we can sew them into fitted garments fairly easily. But we do similar things. You see someone when they're fixing to get ready for a race or get ready to do something hard, the Carhartts all get buttoned up and the zippers get zipped up, and if your boots are loose, you tie them up tight, and so that you're ready to go. So your gear's in order, if you will, and it's not nearly as noticeable or as big of an effect as when they wore the loose garments, but to kind of put it in terms of something that we might do today, it's, tie your shoes tight, zip your jackets up, pull your hat down, tie it on your head, and get ready to go.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Glendon. Brother Ed?
Yeah, I just had a couple notes there further on that. Just read here in case anybody can't see the screen or can't read the notes there. It says today the equivalent, and this goes to what Brother Glendon was just commenting on. The equivalent would be to roll up your sleeves or take off your jacket and get down to work. And in fact, it just means be ready for the most strenuous exercise, mentally or physically. Don't be content if it's mental exercise. Don't be content with a flabby and or unexamined belief. Think things out and think them through. Sometimes things will have to be discarded or tucked out of the way. It's like we see with that rope being done. Sometimes mistakes will be made, but if a good job of thinking it through or sorting it out has been done, what is left will be without the dross, without the bulk, and things that will stick in such a way that nothing and nobody can ever take it away or undo it.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Ed. Brother Sid?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the thought came to me that the other difference between our day and theirs is that we have multiple garments. We have clothes that we wear to the meeting, we have clothes that we wear to town, we have clothes that we wear for work. And if we're doing some really grubby work, we have a pair of overalls to cover over the other clothes that we're wearing. So we have more choices than they did. But in spiritually thinking, we have one garment like they did. They had one garment and they had to make it suitable for all occasions. And spiritually, we have one garment. And we have to be able to fit that garment into every aspect of our life so that we are always ready to be the servant of God and to carry out our servanthood to Him, regardless of what else life presents us with, and the need to have that same garment with us at all times is very important.
Yes, thank you, Brother Sid. That's quite the picture we get here. From the hall.
Yeah, I was just looking at like a couple references of these gird up your loins, just because I thought the saying was interesting. And in the Old Testament, it's very much demanded of all the men, like when they go to battle or they go to work, you gird up do a physical girding up of the loins. And this is like one thing that God demands of Job in Job chapter 3, verse 7. Like at the end of all of Job's complaining, God challenges him on what he's done. And he says, gird up thy loins now like a man, I will demand of thee and declare thou unto me. Like, this is something that he's demanding of him. And then you see the same thing, but only once in the New Testament that I could find. But the girding up of the loins has changed now from like a physical girding up to, in 1 Peter 1:13, wherefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober and hope to the end for grace that is brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So compared to in the Old Testament in type, this is very much a physical thing, where he's saying like get up and go and do work for the Lord, whereas in Peter he's saying in the same sense that you get up and you're ready to fight or you're ready to do work, you have to be prepared to do the same sort of preparation for battle and work in your mental state rather than your physical state.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Austin. It's the words that we get here in these three verses. It provides us the picture, but there's so much in this picture that we're seeing, and so every time I read through the expositor here, and you start thinking about it more and more, it just keeps you going and going and continuing on and studying more. So, any further comments on the end of verse 5 here on girding up the loins with the gold? Brother Sid?
Yeah, it's interesting that they are girded up with fine gold. You know, we think about in some verses here we see on the list their loins girded about with fine gold, and the gold is also mentioned in this verse. But when we think about it, this is a picture of the multitudinous Christ. They are girded with fine linen and the gold, and those are attributes which we are only able to aspire to in this life. They are something that we look forward to being girded with in the day when we become a part of that certain man. And so we are looking at a situation where what we are lacking in order to be seen in that picture will be filled up in the day of our acceptance before Christ.
Yes. Thank you, Brother Sid. Brother Ed?
Yeah, it was just interesting noticing here in John 13 about Christ when he gave the lesson to his disciples about serving one another, and when after they'd been arguing about who would be the greatest, and he, as an example, he took a towel and girded himself with it, and then he washed his disciples' feet and then wiped them with that with which he was girded. And it just shows that is just another use of this clothing with which we are girded, is to be used in the service of our brothers and sisters too, and as a servant and not as a lord.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Ed. And just going back to the expositor there, it's the fine gold Uphaz was the best quality available. And gold is a symbol of a tried faith without which no man can please God. Faith binds and completes the girdle and becomes the strengthening principle of the active man of one. And such a faith comes from hearing the word of God, and by which a believer acts. So it's just, that's kind of what we're hoping to attain to, as Brother Sid is mentioning there. Anyways, we'll move on to maybe verse 6 here. So verse 6 reads, his body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. So we'll read the first part here. His body was like the beryl. The word beryl is from the Hebrew Tarshish, signifying to break, subdue, destroy. The beryl, or Tarshish stone, was one of the gems in the high priest's breastplate, representing the tribe of Dan in Exodus 28, verses 17 to 21. And compare that with Numbers 2, verse 25. Now, Dan means to judge, and we find that in Genesis 49, verses 16 to 18, and 1 Corinthians 6, verse 2. So Dan means to judge, so that the body of the multitudinous Christ, being like the beryl, will perform the judgment written in Psalm 149, verses 6 to 8. And that reads, let the high praises of God in their mouth, sword in their hand, to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishments upon the people, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron. So we'll perform the judgment written as the saints take control of the world rulership. Although in the breastplate, the beryl is the 10th stone listed, its order changes in Revelations 21, 21 verse 20, where it appears as the 8th stone in the New Jerusalem foundation. Comparing this list with the tribes of spiritual Israel listed in Revelation 7, it will be noted that the tribe of Dan is omitted and replaced by the tribe of Levi as the 8th tribe, represented by the beryl. Levi is the priestly tribe, and this apocalyptic symbol takes us beyond the time of judgment, or Dan, to the perfected Levitical community of the millennium. Both judgment and priesthood will be manifested in the man of the one. The beryl stone thus points forward to a time when flesh is to be judged, Dan, subdued, Tarshish, or the Tarshish stone, and taught, Levi, which would be in the future times, as described in Revelations. So any comments on that portion there? We'll go with Brother Ed first.
Have a comment, Brother Darren.
Just thinking about the beryl and the gemstones. What does it take to make a gem? I mean, you don't find them a gem, you know, in the earth. First of all, they've been formed from heat and pressure. We know over a long period of time. And then when they're extracted, they're cut. They're rough. They're still beautiful, but they're rough. You can see the potential of the stone above other stones like ore or something like that, as to be a piece of jewelry or what it can be. And then the jeweler or somebody will take it and they will put it into a certain compound, and you can't put it in with just any compound. It's got to be the right compound of sand and then it's tumbled over weeks and weeks. And any impurities that are in that sand can scratch it, can disform it and ruin it. It's got to be put into the right types of sand, and that sand has to be checked often to make sure that nothing is chipped off of another rock or anything else and is causing the whole thing to be disfigured. And then it's put into a finer sand and a finer sand and a finer sand until out comes this beautiful gem. And it's all done with a mixture of different sands and water. So I find it very neat as to how these gems are made, and you know, the symbology that it would take. It takes, you know, to develop these characteristics in a brother or sister. It takes years and years of study. It takes baptism. It takes working with those around you. And sometimes, sure, there's impurities and stuff that have to be checked in the ecclesia. And but usually all of the little abrasions and fellowship that we enjoy and everything else shapes us into to have all of these characteristics and, you know, of these different gems.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Darren, for describing the process there, and for the lessons out of it. From Richard Hall.
Brother Dan has a comment here, and then Brother Gordon has one.
Okay, Brother Dan.
Quick comment about the placement on the breastplate. Take the breastplate from the time of Moses, and you take it from Revelation. It's intentionally made so that the stones were switched around. For example, in the time of Moses, the jasper was the last stone, and Revelation is the first stone. If it represents Christ, we know he's the Alpha and the Omega. So you take the meetings of all those stones. Here you're dealing with the borough, you're taking Dan, a time of judgment, with Levi. I believe Levi means to join, and that is when they are joined with Christ. So the placement is important to look at in both of them. I mean, it's too big of a study to do at this point, but his point right here is the barrel symbolizing judgment at a period of time, which will then revert to joining with Christ. There will be, in the future, at the end, there will be no need to judge when the kingdom is turned over. It will be a joining fully to Christ. So, just a quick thought.
Thank you, Brother Dan. Brother Gordon?
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, just try to provide a little more context to this. Remember, this is a symbol, or this is a vision that Daniel is observing, and he's so overwhelmed by it that it causes him to go into symbolic depth. So, not trying to, rush it or anything, but these characteristics are of the perfected body of saints. And this underlines the contrast that Daniel was struck with between the present mortal state of perfection and that which will be the high calling called. So just context that all these characteristics represent the fineness of the desirableness of the future body of believers that become perfect.
Thank you, Brother Gordon. Brother Sid, maybe take you as the last go here.
Yeah, just some thoughts that came up as Brother Darren was describing the making of a gem and the process, the tumbling in the water and the sand. We mostly identify the water with the word. The involvement of the word in that polishing process is important. But the other thing that is in there, if you just put a rough gem in a barrel of water and rolled it over for months and months, you would still come out with a rough gem. The sand is the other ingredient that has to be there. And what would the sand be? I believe the sand would be one another that we have in the ecclesia, and it has to be present. It has to be there along with the word in order to be effective in the polishing of the gem. And it also, as Brother Darren pointed out, has to be of the right type of sand, the right, you don't put a fine gem in with road gravel and expect it to come out with a shine on it. And so it makes us ask the question, what kind of polishing agent are we with one another? And as the process goes on, that polishing agent needs to be finer and finer and closer to the properties of the pure water, which is the word. And so we have to examine ourselves whether the effect we have on one another is that of road gravel or is it of a polishing compound. And that is largely determined by the closeness to the word that we have. It's quite a tall order for rough human nature to be employed in the business of polishing one another to become gems. There has to be the influence of the word in there for for us to be anywhere near what we need to be for that task.
Yes, thank you, Brother Sid, and thank everyone here for their comments and being here for the class. It's like it's great discussion and lots of points being brought out and many more that are hidden in there that we could talk about. But maybe to close our class, we'll ask our brother